George Washington used hemp for industrial purposes, and he used it as a supplemental crop. My name is John Stuber, and I am a George Washington biographer and expert. In this video, we're going to talk about George Washington's involvement with hemp in his time and culture, and what does that mean for our times and our culture. George Washington, around the 1760s, 1765, you could say, stopped using tobacco and then used wheat because the tobacco industry was up and down. It was fickle. It was so-so, you could say. So George Washington wanted something with a little bit more consistency where he could continue to plant it and have profitability to himself and his farm. And George Washington then had wheat and then supplemented it with hemp. And hemp was very profitable and sometimes required by Virginia law. And George Washington used this hemp for industrial purposes only, not for recreational, because there are no journal entries, there is no correspondence, letters of George Washington using cannabis to smoke on a recreational level. But he did use hemp a lot for making nets, for making sails, canvases, rope, for anything he needed on his farm, or for sailors for nautical purposes, because it was very malleable and fibrous material. Now, in George Washington's diaries, which this is an abridgment of George Washington's diaries, he talks about hemp a lot and the thankfulness, you could say, or his delightedness in using this product or fiber called hemp. Also, in this book here, First Entrepreneur talks about George Washington's successfulness, his ups and his downs with farming and his financial, prosperity, you could say, and what happened to him. And it's a very good book if you want to know about entrepreneurship of George Washington's time. Now, George Washington then, I got my notes here, let me scroll down here, there's a lot of information. Then in George Washington's time, a lot of the farmers like Thomas Jefferson and other colonial people in Virginia used hemp for industrial purposes. And it was continued to be used all over the United States into the 1800s, like Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois, other, states who wanted to have a prosperous, consistent product to be used for many different uses for industrial things, like canvases, rope, paper, soap, things like that. And then in the late 1800s and 1900s, hemp had a problem. Hemp got tied into the criminalization, you could say, of cannabis because of the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. And the hemp production plummeted severely because it got tied into cannabis and the recreational usage of it. And the problem that I have with it is, even though I do not personally use cannabis, I don't use it in today's culture. I do love cigars though. A Rocky Patel or a My Father cigar, awesome. That's just my opinion. But anyway, is that cannabis got a bad rap and it got tied into hemp. Now, people have the free will to do what you want, and business owners of cannabis have the ability to pursue their dreams, pursue their goal of making a business and creating an LLC or a trust for their business. And George Washington would be proud of you for starting a business because that's what he did. He had his farming business, whether it's hemp or cannabis or what have you. Whether people disagree with it or not, George Washington, on the very slightest level, would be thankful you're an entrepreneur like he was. So 1937 comes around, and hemp sales and production start to plummet. I'm sorry, I had a burp. Anyway, and then during the 1940s, the U.S. government, lucky they were there, I'm just kidding, needed a way to supplement their, production of, the industrial things that we were using hemp for. Rope, sacks, canvas, nets, sails, all kinds of things, paper. And oh my gosh, what do we use? Hemp. And so that's what they started. Oh, you can use hemp and help the U.S. government fight the good fight. Well, then they allowed it. And then it was a really confusing time for a few decades for hemp. And then after that, then it remained in a legal battle, hemp did, because of the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, because of cannabis and hemp again being tied together when they are, you could say hemp and cannabis are like cousins. Like, I am not a business owner of cannabis, but I would, if I had to explain it to someone, I would say that they're like distant cousins. And that's why they get wrapped in together in the legal red tape. But it gets better for hemp. Hemp does prevail. So then in the 1900s, or you could say I shouldn't say that because I already said 1937, but the 1960s, DuPont, the corporation, wants to sell their oil-based products like nylon and polyester and plastic oil-based products, but hemp production is the competitor that is impeding their production. So then what happens? The United States government, I already said that, the Controlled Substances Act, 1970. The DuPont makes a deal with the government in the 60s and 70s, and again, hemp production goes down. And then marijuana or cannabis then gets targeted as this evil thing. And whatever people believe, that's your free will to believe it. I personally, people do whatever you want. It's your free will. And I think that after, it took a long time, decades, for that to come back. And then for hemp production is what I mean to come back. In 2018, though, the 2018 Farm Bill, Donald Trump's administration made it fully legalized to grow hemp for industrial purposes, like canvases, rope, sacks, nets, the same things that George Washington was doing with no impediment from the law. My name is John Stuber. I am a George Washington biographer and expert. Don't forget to check out my book, POTUS 1, about the life and politics of today through the eyes of George Washington. Now, another thing I'd like to say that I forgot is that George Washington would want people in the government to fully understand the 9th and the 10th Amendment. A lot of George Washington biographers don't speak how I speak because they're afraid that that's not what George Washington would say or do. But George Washington was there in the Constitutional Convention making the Constitution. He was POTUS 1. So I would, at the very least, would realize, or at least, how do I say this? We can summarize completely that George Washington, at the very least, would want the 9th and the 10th Amendment, the People's Amendment and the States Amendment, to not be have any kind of impediment by the federal government for hemp and people making industrial things like rope, sacks, canvases, soap or paper or anything like that from hemp. So this has been a awesome video to make. I've been wanting to make this a long time. Looking forward to my next video about George Washington's time and the economy and what does that mean for us today. Thank you. Oh yeah, don't forget to check out my book POTUS 1 on Amazon. You're the best.